Welcome back to another reading and correcting. With me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and I, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. And if you are looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today we are doing chapter 24 of Stepping Wild. Tibs decided he was far enough from the village when there was enough light to take the sky from black through the varying shades of purple and into the pale blue. Only the village hunters would be able to follow his trail, and he doubted Joman could convince them to brave the forest to find him. This should answer he didn't have to depend on his sense to keep away from people, because he had no way to know how he'd react to others' presence while channeling wood. He channeled the element as he walked and waited for the change to affect him. Unlike the other elements, the effect wasn't apparent. He sent essence to a tree that wasn't growing well or immediate. The tree groaned as its branches lifted and the trunk straightened. Its leaves turned vibrant green. Maybe he'd been wrong about wood affecting him. A bush's green essence was marred with the purple of corruption. Annoyed, he pulled that element out, letting it dissipate in the air, and traced where it came from. With a snarl, he ripped the life essence out of the minuscule creatures, gorging themselves on the roots. How dare they sap its essence and replace that with corruption? There were more throughout the ground, and they too he removed. He gently replenished the bush's essence, and they filled out with vibrant leaf. Then he nourished them with more essence. Harvest season was coming, so they'd need it. Or would they? Was it when the forest was it was that when forest bushes fruited? He shrugged. Giving them more essence could only be good for them. But he'd ask Mother Natrel about it. She'd know. And he'd have to sense her field. There were bound to be more of those wretched creatures in the ground there, causing the wheat and vegetables to grow weak. He resumed walking, helping the plants grow, removing the creatures that would hurt them, and paying close attention to any changes in his thinking. He wouldn't fall to wood the way he'd fallen to the other elements. He noticed the diminishing light, but didn't let him stop his ministration. So many of the trees needed his help to thrive, and it wasn't like a lack of light bothered him. Thirst wasn't something that affected him anymore. He didn't even have to think about the water essence in him, and I'll remove this anymore. I only need one of them. He didn't even have to think about the water essence in him anymore. Hunger made itself felt, but he ignored it. What was it compared to so many trees that were stunted because they weren't tall enough to get the full light essence the sun sent for them? Or those roots, or those whose roots had become bound in stone and couldn't draw the essence they needed from there. Then he came across the injured animal. It had a long gash in its side where blood and life essence leaked into the sharp rock. It had also broken a front and hind leg in the fall, keeping it from moving away from Tibs. It's okay, he whispered over its hissing, etching purity. I'm going to make it all better. The etching broke apart from the pain as it clawed his arm. I'm trying to help. He coated the arm with earth and etched it again, then applied it to the animal's side. With the danger of it dying gone, he focused on the limbs. He stopped halfway through that etching. As soon as it started healing, it would run off, causing itself more damage. More damage. He needed to make splints before. That was odd. The reserve in his bracers, where he kept life essence, not contained the wood. Many of them did. It made sense. The elements were all around him to pull on. Wood was the only one he needed to keep a reserve of, the one element he never wanted to be out of. As for the split, that was simple enough to resolve. He channeled his element and Tibs staggered in shock, and the swipe missed his head. He hurried to step away from the snarling large cat and applied a purity etching onto his cut. He stared at the animal. What had he been thinking? That it needed help, that everything needed it. He looked back the way the heat come, saw nothing different, but he sensed it. All those trees he'd helped glowed with wood essence. Would that help them? If he just filled someone with life essence, he'd hurt them. Were plants different? Could they deal with too much essence? He doubted it, but what would happen if he just pulled that out now? The annoying thing was that he didn't know when the element had started affecting him. He'd been walking, intent on heading to the dungeon as he channeled it, and he'd killed those worms without hesitation. Even now, their death didn't bother him. They were just worms. But it was the casual way he'd taken their life essence away. Absorbing it hadn't even entered his thoughts. And his bracers? They were needed because he needed to have access to multiple elements, and he'd replaced nearly all of them with wood without thinking. Figured the only reason he had the non-purity was that he kept, okay, I can adjust this here. He kept using it for small etchings here and there and on the plants to fix the damage. Okay, it's not the only. Figure the reason. I don't need the only here. Figure the reason. As for darkness, maybe because he was always maintaining the etching over the brand. He looked at the cat. It had settled, panting, and eyed him. What had been his plan toward it? In the moment, making the splints, and after? Even now, his life essence was dangerously thin. Its life essence was dangerously thin. He knew there was little he could do about that. With a person making sure they rested while their essence rebuilt was the best way he could. That was the best he could do. But under the influence of would he have filled it with essence the way he'd filled the trees with wood? He needed to help. But did so without needed to help, but did so without thinking of the consequences or of how he could hurt them and others in the process. His stomach groaned. How late was it? Neither Taurus nor Clario were visible, so it was either early in the night or late. He should go back to the village, but without them or the sun, he had no idea where it was. Until sunrise, he was lost. If I had jerky, told the cat, would that make you not want to eat me? He should get back in that habit. If he had some, he'd have something to eat. Luckily for you, I don't have to get close to help. He paused in the process of forming the splint. But I can't. He shouldn't feel bad about it. It was an animal, not a person. It couldn't understand what he'd done. I can only maintain the splint if you stay in my range, and you're going to run off as soon as you feel better. I can't follow you. Not that you'd like that. And once you ran out of it, the itching on the gash had healed it, and was healing more of the internal damage. Paid attention to the part that approached the bones and undid that before it could heal them. His etchings didn't fix bone. It mended them in the position they were, even if that was bent wrong. In a person, it would be easy, if unpleasant, to straighten the leg and arm and then apply the etching. In the cat, he'd need the splint to put them in the right way and it would run off. But if he did nothing, he was leaving it here to die of thirst and hunger, unable to move, to hunt, leaving it to suffer. That had been one of Wood's lessons. Sometimes what needed to be done was painful. Was that his option here? To do the hard thing so the animal wouldn't suffer? What else would happen if he didn't heal it fully? And he knew it wouldn't let him heal it. It was an animal in pain. It would run off the instant it felt like. To the abyss with their lesson, he stood. You're not going to like this, and I'm sorry, but you need to be healed, and that you like it or not. He pulled the earth over the large cat's torso, and it trashed, clawing at it with its good limb and injuring itself further in the attempt to escape. A bone broke through this fur as it tried to push away before he had the earth over that. And it was hard enough to fully immobilize it. It screamed and hissed, and Tibs hardened himself against the pain he knew he was causing. This needed to be done. He made the splint and held it in place. Oh, I see. This is where he felt like I was using stone. Huh. He made the splint and held it in place as he softened the ground around the leg. He used it to align the bones so the break in the flow of essence was as little as possible. It wasn't perfect. He wasn't good enough with his essence to fix that fully. So it would have to be enough. He applied the purity etching and moved on to the other limb, doing the same. The cat stopped struggling and screaming, its panting heavy. He sat away and let the essence work, using the time to refill his reserves with a better selection of essence. The sky turned the sky had turned pale sunrise ward, and when the etchings were done with their work. He quoted himself in case it decided to hold him accountable for the pain. Then let the monodeka fall apart and undid the splits. You know what? That will deal with that. It was up and running in the opposite direction without even a glance in his direction. You know what? It was off and running without even a glance in his direction. He sensed its essence until he lost it among the background essence of the forest and considered what to do next. His stomach made the decision for him. The sun was up, so he knew where he'd find food. Maybe returning empty-handed from a hunt would make him more normal to the villagers' eyes. Tibbs's return to the village was eclipsed by one of them deathly sick. The woman had injured herself in the field days before. A deep cut, she tended there and resumed working. She'd been fine for the next days, but the day before had been unable to get out of bed, sick with fever. Tibbs visited her along with the others, hoping he could help, but knowing he wouldn't be able to. The injury had healed, but her essence had become poisoned in the process by an essence that wasn't corruption. That wasn't one he had, so he could do nothing for her. Applying a purity etching would repair the damage, but it would just stretch her suffering. He knew what the hard decision was. He could see it in the others' eyes, they knew it. He could see in the others' eyes, they knew it too. But he was no more able to offer an end to her suffering than they were. And that concludes chapter 24 of Stepping Wild. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter will be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read this story, it is up for free on Royal Road. If you want to read ahead of that and support me in the process, that is on a Ream story. I'd say it's about 12 chapters ahead. And if you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch and YouTube. Links are in the notes, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.